all the folks in the room. Thank you so much for joining the panel of Advancing Diversity and Inclusion Through Partnerships. If we haven't met, my name is Juanita Lee Garcia. My pronouns are she, her, and I am joining you today from Toronto, which is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, the Wendat, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nations, and many nations who live in our urban city today. This expert panel that we brought together is a group of really incredible folks who have done a lot of partnership work over their life, and partnerships both internally within the organizations and partnerships externally with others to drive the needle on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and who are folks that often look at values alignment and mission alignment to maximize all of their efforts related to DEI. I'm really excited to introduce Fahd and Janey. Unfortunately, Sean Colley, the director of talent and business partner at Shopify, won't be able to join us this morning due to a personal family matter. Sean is deeply, deeply apologetic for missing out on this. And what we will be doing is recording his stage talk, which he had planned, and then providing folks with the opportunity to connect with Sean directly for questions or future networking opportunities. Sean's talk was going to be about building and fostering relationships internally in his career with different groups of folks to advocate for folks in positions of power and to help folks understand the power dynamics that they hold within partnerships. If you have any questions for Sean, please let me know and I will be happy to send those over to him. And then if you want to hear Sean's stage talk specifically, please reach out to us and I will make sure that that link gets sent to you once it is recorded. I'm going to start with an introduction of Janey, since she's on stage with us right now. Janey will go second, but Janey Buzugbe, can you correct me if that is right?
Yeah, it's Buzugbe.
Buzugbe.
Good
Janey
job.
Buzugbe. Thank you. Please feel free to ask you how to pronounce folks' names. We're in the space of learning and ensuring that everybody feels really comfortable. Janey is the head of Black Innovation Programs and Partnerships at the DMZ, and also has her own organization, which she will be telling you more about. She's an energetic entrepreneur and a technology leader who believes in living her life by giving. And what she has to give is humanity at the intersection of business and technology. I've had the pleasure of getting to know Janey over the past couple of weeks and already have built some really exciting partnerships for different projects at Venture for Canada. What's super impressive about her journey is as the founder of Immunication, a community-based startup that supports over 17,000 plus immigrant professionals, she has been able to lead things like career readiness and skills development programs. At the DMC, she is focused on the Black Innovation Programs, and if you have any questions about that specifically, I'm sure she'd love to answer them. But over the past decade, her career has been over the corporate, nonprofit, and startup worlds. So really that cross-sector leadership experience building. So I am super excited for her to speak with us today. Recently, Janey also graduated from the Media and Account Management and Masters of Innovation and Entrepreneurship program from the Smith School of Business at Queen's University, which is a program that a lot of our folks here at VOC have also taken. But really looking forward to your talk, Janey. I'm going to introduce Fahd, and I think Fahd is almost joining us. Priscilla's going to let me know. There's some link issues, I think, as always, with tech platforms and calendar invitations.
Yeah, he'll be with us shortly, so maybe we
Perfect. Okay, I'm gonna wait for Fahd because I do want to make sure that he is here when I introduce him and that he's
here now.
Hey.
Hello, how are you?
Good. Sorry for the tech inconveniences as it goes with virtual events.
It's all good. Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, super excited to have you. I just introduced Janey, and I know that you've read her bio and that we've been on email threads, but I was about to introduce you and I wanted you to be here, so I didn't miss your bio and intro. It's such a pleasure to have Fahad join us too. Fahad, I mentioned that Sean unfortunately isn't able to make it today. So it'll be the three of us in the room, and really encourage tons of questions from our audience, but also I have some questions for both of you after your stage talks. Fahad, can you pronounce your last name for me?
Yeah, it's Alhattab.
Fahd Alhattab is the founder and leadership development speaker at Unicorn Labs. It's this amazing company and content newsletter. If you've never heard of them, highly, highly recommended. And Fahad is an award-winning speaker, coach, and consultant. I've seen Fahad in action, I think, since 2018 at student and tech space conferences and events. And over the past 13 years, he's been building training programs and has been building resources for folks to uncover high growth potential and high growth leaders within their organizations. Using humor, storytelling, and actionable advice, Fahad inspires people to become the unicorn leader who builds unstoppable teams. I'm going to actually pass it over to Fahad right away. He's going to kick us off with his stage talk. We'll then have some time for questions. We'll pass it over to Janey. We'll have some questions, and then we'll have more of an open discussion. And I'd love for this to be super interactive. So if there's anything that you don't want to ask them directly, feel free to private message me on the chat. So you go direct people, VFC, and just look up Juanita, Juanita, and send me the question that you might want to ask them. If you do want to ask, you can just ask directly in the session chat. Over to you, Fahad.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for the introduction. And I'm excited to join you guys. This is going to be really fun, really awesome to share. I actually wanted to share a study that I came across while I was first learning about teams. And it's a study by a gentleman called by the name of Peter Skillman. And it's something that we've actually all probably played around with. It's called the pasta tower experiment. Okay. So you've probably done this maybe in elementary school. They give you a bunch of pasta. That's hard. They give you a bunch of tape. They give you a bunch of yard, and they're like, build the biggest tower, right? That was the game that we played. When I uncovered this study and I was learning about it, it was trying to answer a specific question. It was trying to answer the question, what makes high performing teams? It was trying to understand, why is it that some teams that we're on, and I'm sure we've experienced this, some teams that we're on are like brilliant. The sum of the individuals is greater. Like everyone coming together, it's so much greater than just the individual parts, and it's so smooth and it's powerful. And then the opposite happens. We're on some teams where I swear we would be better off if we were working on our own, where the sum of the individual parts actually equals less than the total, where coming together makes us less effective. And that was the question Peter Skillman was trying to answer using this game that you and I would have played probably in elementary school or high school, kind of as a craft activity. And I was like, hey, this is funny. This is strange. Let me learn more about this. Let me unpack this, right? Because I'm interested in this question. What makes high performing teams? Why is it that some teams we work on are powerful and phenomenal and some that are not? And it felt like there were so many different answers to that. Answers like, well, it depends on the people in the team, right? Like how many people. It depended on the quality of the people, whether they're good, do they have talent? Are they smart? We want smart people. All of these different things. Do they know how to solve the problem before? So I had all these hypotheses, and we read literature around what makes high-performing teams, and they give us a slew of different things, from gender diversity to cultural diversities, race diversities, to all these different aspects of what makes high-performing teams. Anyways, so here I am thinking through this, and you're thinking through this too. What makes high-performing team? Come across this study, and here's how it goes. So Peter Skillman, he gives you spaghetti, gives you yard, gives you tape, and he gives you one big fat marshmallow. And he says the only rule in this experiment is that you have to put the big fat marshmallow on top. And he puts you in groups of 4. Where does he do this? He actually does this in Stanford. He does this in Harvard. He does this in Yale. He actually goes to where we as society would typically expect the cream of the crop. He goes to MBA students in these schools, where it's really hard to get in. And he has, a room, and he puts up the cameras so you can watch it. You get into your group of 4 and you start building. Now, he does this and he gets them to build the towers. And then he also repeats the same exact experiment with kindergartners. Catch that. Kindergartners from the same area, from the same regions geographically, right? So he's got the MBA students, and he watches the videos and he shows the videos in his study. It's really interesting. You watch the MBA students, and what's happening with the MBA students is they're like strategic. They're asking questions. They're like, oh, what do we do here? What about this? They're taking chances to talk, and they're making sure everyone is heard. They're doing all the things that look right for team dynamics. It's super cool to watch because they're trained. They've done this. They've gone through this. They know how a business project at school goes, and so they're doing this, and so they're strategizing and they're doing all this stuff, and it looks smooth. You watch the tapes with the kindergartners, and if you have children, you probably know this. If you have nieces and nephews, you might be able to recognize this. But the kids sat around the table, and they were like close. They were all tight in, shoulder to shoulder, and they were like making sounds like, "Man, here, do this, do that, do this." They were just like yelling little commands to each other. No, don't do this. It was not smooth. It was all over the place. There was no strategy. There was no way. They didn't communicate properly. There was no strategy. It was weird to watch. Now, if you and I were to take a bet right now on who built the higher pasta towers, it would be a fun bet for us to take because it's obvious, right? Like MBA students would build the higher towers. They are smarter. They understand more, everything. They're better talented. They're older, more experienced. Every checkbox that we would use for when we hire someone, the MBA students are better at. But you and I would be wrong. And not wrong by like a little, but wrong by double the amount. Wait for it here. The MBA students built towers on average. This was repeated dozens of times. On average, 13 inches tall. The kindergartner students, 26 inches tall. Double the amount of our MBA students. Double the amount of the students who we would consider to be way more intelligent. It's kind of weird. And it was super confusing when I was going through this. And so I dug more into it. To understand the different pieces of it. And Peter Skillman comes to a few insights. He says, when you and I are watching the videos of the MBA students and kindergarten students, what we're picking up on, what we think is smooth interaction, there's an underlayer there. The MBA students are engaging in what's called status management. They're walking on eggshells, trying to figure out, oh, who gets to call the shot? Who does what? Who says what? Right? You've experienced this. You're in a new group. You put on different masks. You don't know how to participate. Is it my turn? Am I allowed to say this? Am I not allowed to say this? Who's in charge? What are we allowed to do? What are we not allowed to do? And they spend half the time trying to navigate the human and social kind of constructs that have been created. And they engage in status management. While the kindergartners have no clue about certain social norms. So what do? They get started right away. They get right into it and they start building these different towers. And what's super interesting here is that when we look into it and we dig deeper into it, what we learn is that most of us think what makes a high-performing team are the individual talent parts of the team. How good are the individuals? But really what makes a high-performing team is the interaction, the team dynamics. How well does each person actually get along? How well do they engage with each other? That is what makes a powerful team. And it kind of sounds obvious when you say it, but it's not obvious in practice. The interactions of the individuals trumps the talent of the individuals. We can have really talented people that are the right person for the job, but unless we have a cohesive group, unless we have cohesion, unless we have team dynamics, unless we have trust, unless we have psychological safety, unless we have these different pieces and norms, then we actually fail in creating high-performing teams. We fail in creating diversity and inclusion. We fail in creating a safe space for different ideas to thrive. So then begs the question, okay, Fahd, if I agree with you that team cohesion is more important than individual team talent because of this study, then what's the single thing I could do to improve my team dynamics? As a company, what's the single thing that could actually move the needle forward? And usually people will tell you there's no single thing, right? It's a lot of things. You got to do a bit of this. You got to do a bit of that. You got to do a bit of this. Perhaps that's all true. Perhaps. until in most recent years, another study was done. This one's by Gallup. This one's super interesting. They tried to understand the effect of a manager on team cohesion. And this is the wild conclusion. And I'm going to share my screen here so you can read it with me as I say it out loud, because I think it's super important. Managers, they determine 70% of variance in team engagement. Whoa, 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 catch that. Usually when we ask the question, what's the single thing I could do to improve my team dynamics? You're like, well, you should have social events, and you should have learning and development days, and you should have team building exercises, and there's all these sorts of different ideas. But one second, no. 70% of your employee engagement, 70% of it, of how good your team works together, how engaged they are, is actually purely determined by the manager. In that case, you have one lever to pull. If you want to see the biggest return on improvement in your teams, if you want to see the biggest improvement on your teams and how they work well together, well, we need to pull this lever. We need to engage the manager, because 70% of variance is in the manager. And it's simple. You reshape your corporate culture. You reshape how safe your spaces are. You reshape whether you have genuine good diversity and inclusion and equity by developing managers into leaders who create high-performing teams. Far too often I hear the excuse of, well, Fahd, we can't always find the right talent. We can't find the right talent to fill these roles that are diverse. You know, and people say it's a pipeline issue, right? We don't have enough people in the recruitment. I don't have senior executives that can fit the gender that we need, or the culture, the race that they have. Yeah, it's because we haven't invested in them. Because we haven't invested in young talent, in young managers who can become these leaders, who can make the difference that we're looking for. That's really what we need to do. And not just for diversity and inclusion, but for the sake of our startups, our organizations, our communities, that this is the answer. Because failing to develop the human potential that we have in our teams already is actually the leading cause of declining workforce productivity. Wild. So all we really need to do is develop our workforce. But how do we do that? Here's going to lay out a step-by-step system for you. These are the 6 things your manager needs to do in order to move that 70% variance. There are 6 things that they need to do to be able to actually create a high-performing team that is inclusive, that gives people opportunity that wouldn't otherwise have opportunities, and that develops the talent that you're looking for in your startups. And the first step is creating psychological safety. Psychological safety is defined as a person's willingness to take interpersonal risk in a group without fear of consequence. Complicated little definition. Basically, am I willing to speak my mind? Can I debate? Can I engage in conversation? Psychological safety is what our kindergartners had, and our MBA students didn't. Our MBA students were tippy-toeing around, oh, can't say that here, oh, who's in charge, who's allowed. But our kindergartners, because they didn't perhaps, be trained into thinking that they've got to balance all these different egos, they simply engage in psychological safety. They say, no, don't do that. Here, try this. What about this? They would just engage in conversation. Diversity and inclusion starts at psychological safety. And psychological safety starts at our managers. If our manager does not create a safe space for people to share ideas, to have stupid ideas that aren't ridiculed, to have enough bad ideas that lead us to our good ones, as Seth Godin would say, then we fail our managers and our teams fail. So managers' number one goal is actually to create psychological safety. Their second goal is to create empowerment. That's to have really clear roles. That's to have really clear goals. And that's to push decision-making down to those who are closest to it. Because when our managers empower the different people on our team, we start to create future leaders. We start to create that pipeline. We start to create that talent. We start to create that team cohesion that we're looking for. Instead of fighting for talent and how expensive talent's become and how competitive it is, employees stick around when they're empowered and they feel psychological safety. But there's a reason this model is built as a little pyramid. Because one builds onto the other. You can't have empowerment if you don't have psychological safety. And then you can't continue unless you have effective communication. And effective communication, there's two pieces to it. This is what we need our managers to create, because I need to be able to speak up when I disagree. I need to have an environment where if my manager does something that is against our diversity and inclusion lens, but is unaware of it, that I have the psychological safety to be able to call them in, to say, hey, that's not how we act here. Hey, what you said really created a bad environment for me. I didn't feel safe. And unless our managers are trained in leadership practices that create this sort of thing, then we're not creating a good environment. We're not creating a high-performing team. So effective communication splits into two pieces. One, it's the synchronization of information. Does information flow? But two, it's whether we engage in productive conflict. Because you're not truly effectively communicating if you're pulling back your punches, if you're pulling back your ideas every single time. Fourth, effective managers, to be able to pull the 70% of variance with employee engagement, you need to create a culture of leadership where they have different leadership styles, where they engage in coaching with their team. That allows them then to create a sense of purpose, and finally to connect the team to an all-encompassing vision to move things forward. Those are the steps in order for us to empower managers to be and create high-performing teams, to ensure that we don't fall in the same trap as the MBA students, but we create the kindergarten environments of the Pass the Tower experiment in our own teams, and to allow for diverse thought and not groupthink to thrive. We all know the idea of the 10x engineer, and seems to have found its way through a lot of startup world. Well, what about the 10x manager? What about the unicorn leader? The leader who can create 10x return on your high-performing team, because when you bring them together, they have a cohesion, they have a sense of safety, and they have a sense of understanding of what brings out the best in everyone. That's my message here for you today. That's what I really wanted you to take away, is that if we want to invest in the diversity and inclusion of our organizations, invest in the leadership development of our managers, because that will be one of the biggest areas in which we can really shift culture and organization. Thank you so much for letting me share. I think you're muted.
I was. I just said, I love hearing you speak every single time. I have two questions for you. The first is, will our attendees have access to your slides? It's an amazing slide deck. That's the first question, and specifically coming from Kelsey.
Definitely can give you a slide. How about I take it one step further? We have a nice little ebook that breaks down the 6 levels of high-performing teams that I just went through, and we'd be happy to provide that to everyone who wants. How about I throw my email in the chat there, and then if you want it, just give me a little shout out and say, hey, Fahd, I'm looking for the slide deck or the ebook on the 6 levels of high-performing teams. Happy to share that ebook. It's 12 pages with some information and actionable items for us all to take.
Amazing. And before we go over to Janey, and then we'll do kind of more of like questions for the both of you at the end. Natalie's asking, she's curious on your thoughts on how this aligns with, if at all, employee engagement, and is it just repackaged and renamed?
That's a good question. It is employee engagement. I don't think it necessarily is repackaged and renamed. I think what we're getting at is there's a lot of discussion around. There's a lot of discussion from a hiring perspective around, do we have the right leaders available in our talent pools to be able to hire from diverse communities? That's one question that really kind of comes up. And really, it's about raising those people, or giving them the chance all the way through. If you've got juniors that have the opportunity, it's about developing their skill set. So it really is about developing leaders. And in that sense, what we do is we end up creating a really good employee engagement. But what is employee engagement? Well, it's having a safe space. It's having a diverse space. I'm not engaged if I don't feel that I see other people like me in my work, that I feel safe. I feel there's a sense of diversity. I feel that there's a sense of inclusion. So perhaps not repackaged, but perhaps focused, Natalie. A sliver within employee engagement is the fact that, can we really have high employee engagement scores if we don't have high diversity and inclusion scores where leadership helps create that?
Yeah, I think you can think about it strategically too. And what you're saying is you don't have to do it alone, right? It also doesn't just have to always be internal. And if you have a partnership with another organization, or you partner with a peer organization in your co-working space, or potentially someone that is in your same community, and like get their managers to talk to your managers and create like safe peer groups where they can like share some of the things. It doesn't always have to be like internal. So it doesn't have to be like, oh, share kind of some of your management challenges with HR or with your direct report or with another peer at the organization. You can build some really, I think, interesting opportunities for managers to connect and like develop their own skill set. I also think what you were saying and talking about engagement when it comes to partnerships is that you can always offer things to employees, right? Like offering things to employees for them to engage with is retention, and it gets them to feel like a sense of belonging, but also encouraging them to build partnerships like that they want to bring into the organization. So if they see a cool organization that's doing workshops and that they want to engage with, like actually having a feedback loop for them to be able to say, hey, why don't we get this person in to do a workshop on relationship building, or why don't we get this person to do a workshop on mental health, and listening to where they need those supports and activating that for them.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's really the basis of what we've done at Unicorn Labs, right? Is we've partnered with many organizations to provide the learning and development for leaders that allows it to be a broader perspective than perhaps traditional leadership programs that involve lenses around diversity and inclusion, that involve lenses around employee engagement, but give companies, as you've said, Janey, which I love, is the cross-pollination across companies, because we can learn from each other in our learning development, in our leadership development, and in our diversity and inclusion lenses.
Amazing. Janey, I'm going to pass it over to you. And then Dawn, I'm going to save your question actually for both of them to answer at the end.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Fahd. I honestly thought we collaborated on your deck because I have some exciting conversations to be had today. Hello, beautiful people. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here at the All Things People conference. I'm going to share my screen in a second. And it's a perfect time to be having tech issues. 1 second.
Let me know if you need support.
Okay, will do. Okay, there we go. See my screen okay?
We can't.
In a second. Still nothing. Okay, Juanita, do you have access to my deck? Would you help share it?
I do have access to your deck. Okay. Jonathan?
Yeah, I can bring it up if you want. I've got it ready.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, just let me know when you want to advance. Just bear with me while I find the right tab. Here we go.
Thank you. Oops. Awesome. Okay, thank you all so much for your patience with me. So next slide. Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to the conversation. My name is Janey, and I am the founder of Immunication, but in my day job, I also work as the head of partnerships and programs over at the DMZ. But let me take it a little bit back. My story begins all the way back in Nigeria decades ago. I am a first daughter of a military family, so I got to experience a lot of people and environments very early on. I decided after many years of working in tech that I was going to move to Canada so that I can, invent myself again as a digital media leader. I had no clue what I was expecting when I moved to Canada in 2015. And so typically, if you know anything about Nigerians, there's 4 things you can be. You can be a doctor, an engineer, a lawyer, or a bum. And I chose the bum route. So you should know how proud my parents are of me. So I have 4 degrees across advertising, technology, entrepreneurship, account management, all the routes. but I had no clue what North America would see me as, to be honest. Today, you will find me at the intersection of business and technology. I love playing right there, especially when it comes to dealing with humanity. I'm a champion for what people will call underrepresented voices, but I say underestimated voices. I love Beyonce, Pink, and everything quotes, and as you will see today in my presentation, and everything dance. I'm a rule breaker, so I always question conversations that are happening and ideas, but really you should just read Disruptor for the sake of this conversation. But most importantly, for the way we're going to have this conversation is I've only been 7 years Black. What does that mean? People are like, what? I can see your skin tone. Let me tell you. So before I moved to Canada in 2015, I was just a Nigerian woman. And then the first time I think I realized I was Black, because where I'm from, everyone is Black. And so it's not a thing, you know. I got to class in 2015 on advertising program in Humber College. And the first day I had protective styling like I have on right now. And it was time to form groups and no one would form a group with me. I had no clue what was going on. And then I was like, you know what, that's sucks for them. I'm the sauce. It will take till we had midterms for us to, you know, the professor comes back and then looks at my sheet and says, who is Janey? That's me. And decides to keep my paper as an example for the next class. Everyone notices what happens, and I became the hottest kid in class. I didn't even realize then at the time that that was a microaggression, or, so to speak, unconscious bias that people had around me. There will be so many other issues that happen in class that would start to teach me that I was now Black, and the issues I had to face now as a Black woman in North America. But since then, I have grown in my career. I've worked in tech sales, I've worked in tech partnerships, predominantly white, predominantly male-dominated fields, and being able to grow to leadership. And I'm just going to be here to share my story. Next slide, please. And so, like I said, we're going to have a conversation around a lot of quotes. So what gets measured gets done. I want us to start with, if we track annual revenue, why not annual representation? Yep, that's a quote by me. Let's start from there. I know the conversation right now is a lot of talk around getting more talent into our doors. And we don't need more talent. There is a surplus of talent. And Fahad kind of alluded to this. We just need to, you know, support the folks in our organizations more. Next, please. And if there's one thing the pandemic taught us, is that we all work in the tech industry. So first of all, Toronto is the fastest growing tech market in North America, greater than New York, Seattle, and Boston combined. The percentage of all immigrants with a higher education is twice that of the Canadian-born population. International education alone in Canada represents a significant economic benefit to Canada, contributing an average of 22 billion to Canada's GDP. However, visible minorities are still underrepresented, underpaid, and under-influenced, especially when you're Black. The data is everywhere. I don't need to tell you. You know how many cents on the dollar Black people get compared to non-Black people, and it's even worse when you are a woman. But we'll talk about that. Next slide. I know you want to say, I don't want to be quick enough to say there is not enough X folks in STEM, or, you know, there's not enough representation in my field, but we know that it's not a pipeline problem. It's a network issue. Next, please. It's really not a network issue. It's a partnership issue. And this is where we talk about. Let's talk about what it looks like. So think about how, for me, I was a top student in my program, in my advertising program, 2 years in a row. And I was one of the last ones to get an internship. So I left advertising. And so if advertising wants to say that there's not enough representation in that industry, pretty much we're not thinking about who exists today. So given that our networks influence the way we think about opportunities that we give, the ones that we receive, lack of diversity with these networks can propagate inequitable systems. Next slide. So look at your most recent LinkedIn connections. Do they mostly look like you? Who are the last 5 people you accepted on LinkedIn? What did they look like? Look at your last 5 hires in your organization. What communities do they represent? How are you hiring? Where are you hiring from? Are you hiring from those same agencies, those same recruiters that give you the same type of kids who went to the same type of schools? I'm just asking questions. I'm not poking fingers. Who are you partnering with? Is it that same organization, like I just said, that hires from the same schools? There are organizations today that can help you hire diverse. There's organizations that can help you train hiring managers. It's a question of how much intentionality and focus we're putting towards what we want to see in our people. But you know what's also very important? Look at the last couple of people who have left. What roles and what positions. Attrition data speaks very loud in our organizations. And until we solve for the network issue, and so that's the only time we can start having underrepresented people in our orgs and growing to leadership. And I know because we're in the people conference, people want to typically say that the work of DEI is for folks in the people department. That is not true. We know the same. People do not leave terrible organizations, to leave bad bosses. Fahd talked about it. It's a lot of times about what we're doing as hiring managers. Are we empowering people? And so let's focus on that. So let's talk about the 3 pillars of advancement. The first is allyship and privilege. I actually like to say advocacy and privilege. And this picture depicts it very clearly. I know everyone wants to think, oh my goodness, I don't have privilege. I'm struggling, I'm minimum wage, I'm whatever, but we all do have privilege. And you can't fully understand allyship without an awareness of your privilege. I'll start first. I'll actually go first. My privilege is that I'm an educated, middle-class African woman from Nigeria who grew up in a society where I got to see strong Black leaders, and I grew up in a very stable family, contrary to what most people would think when they just see me. And so my privilege that I share with other Black folks who grew up in North America is that understanding of representation and confidence in myself, and I can give space knowing that I have that privilege. So a lot of times it comes from self-reflection, like what do I have? What voice do I have? Who around me is not getting the same, I would say, access that I have? And how can I share a little bit of mine with them? So not everyone is sitting at the front of the class. So pretty much some people are throwing their paper all the way from the back. And the next piece too then is intersectionality. There is always a danger of the one single story. I'll give you an example. When I went to Kingston for my master's, I would go to parties. I was one of 2 Black girls in a program of almost 70 people. And I am fun. I'm the life of the party. So trust me, when any song comes on, you catch me on the dance floor. And people will whip out their phones and just start recording, which I thought was interesting and weird, frankly. But what was even more interesting was anytime a rap song comes on, it was like, Janey, sing the lyrics. I didn't listen to rap. But the thing is, I think people had made up that idea in their head that if you're Black, you must listen to rap, meaning you must twerk in all our parties. There's a danger of a single story. And let's think about intersectionality, because a lot of times in our politeness as Canadians, in our niceness as Canadians, we want to create one solution for a group of people. And so the road to inclusion, especially in partnerships, cannot be painted with one broad stroke. We have to consider the sum total of people's social organizations and categories: race, class, gender. So for me, my intersections are: I am Black, I am woman, I am immigrant, I am Christian, the list goes on. So when I go to conferences and events who say, for women in leadership, and I see mostly one type of woman, I wonder what I'm missing in my femininity. I think because how I experience womanhood will be different from other races, definitely, and classes. But I'll say this is to get this conversation started on intersectionality. I would really advise that you listen to this TED Talk by Chimamanda Adichie. It's called The Danger of a Single Story. And because I said that, we need to do a lot of the work ourselves. And the next piece then is psychological safety, which Fahd had talked about. A lot of people want to focus so much on the pipeline, like get people through the door. That's not enough. And pretty much, I think that with the way we're going with hiring people right now, we're losing money. Data has shown that it takes an average of 2.5 years for you to return an investment from a new hire, because at that time they've gone through the storming and the forming and they're beginning to contribute into the organization. So if you don't have an environment where folks feel safe, where their voices can be heard, where they can speak up without fear of retribution, people are leaving before that mark, when you can actually start as an organization to reap the rewards of that amazing, talented, diverse hire you've gotten. So again, too, I know that right now we're focusing so much on representation that I, in my own experience, have been facing what is called tokenistic inclusion. I know, big DEI terms. I'm learning all of this too. And what does that mean really truly is we want to check a box. We want to say we have this percentage of representation. We need to check our motives. We want that so much that we don't want the full sum of what it means to come into that workplace. We want a Black woman, but we don't want her to come with braids. We want an immigrant, but we don't want them to come with an accent. So these are the things that we are talking about when we don't create safe environments. And so there's situations where you hire people but you still want to tell them how to work in their role. You still want to, micromanage them. You still want to tell them this is the way we do things here in Canada. I know, because I got rejected a lot of times for being overqualified and not having Canadian experience. What is that? That's a whole nother conversation. So the thing is that when we don't have psychological safety at work, when people feel that they can't share their ideas, we're missing out on talent, and it has serious business repercussions, serious damages to our bottom line. If we're just only going to focus on profit, we're still doing it wrong. And if I want to go into details, but I think a good resource that you can use definitely is definitely the book, The Memo by Minda Hart. This talks about how Black women experience the workplace and how if you truly want to be an ally and advocate, things you can do to step in between. Next slide, please. And so this quote is definitely not from me, but we know that if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. So there's just a couple more slides. Next one. So the truth is, I'm just going to now share how we can support and be a true partner. There's 3 ways, really. You can go beside folks to support them, listen, and walk them through an experience. You can go in front of them to help them avoid hurt and harm, and then behind them to support, recognizing that they're the experts in their careers and expert in their domains. So next one, we're going to go through this quick. In a racist society, it's not enough to be racist. We must be anti-racist. So being non-racist, just to clarify, means that you're being passive. Really, it's just like, I'm not racist. It doesn't affect me. But with being anti-racist means stepping in and supporting people and observing and thinking about how we can use our privilege. Next one, we're going to go really fast. And so these are just points to sum it all up on how we can move forward. The first thing is always be recruiting. Seek diversity early in building strong networks. So don't just use the same organizations we use or the same lead list we work with. This point was hammered on by Fahd: train people managers. People don't leave organizations that are not that, they leave managers. The middle is really messy. It's the DEI is solely not for HR and people functions. I just want to say that again. C is self-reflect and educate, like understand your own biases, educate yourself more, look at resources and listen to the people who are going through experiences. Next point is really just see something, say something, help people call out microaggressions, as well as acknowledge and fix your own. And lastly is we always want to check pulse. So create spaces where underrepresented people can have a voice, employee resource groups, conduct diversity policy audits, and ask for employee feedback. Sometimes note that people may not feel safe giving this feedback, so you can host anonymous listening sessions. And with that, 2 more slides and we're done. If there's one thing I want to leave you with today, next slide, is when the whole world is silent, even one voice becomes powerful. And so lastly, I just want to ask you, how are you going to use your voice today? Again, my name is Janey, and I hope I've earned the privilege of your time. Thank you so much for listening.
Thanks so much, Janey. I have so many notes from that both of you kind of brought up around like the assumptions that we have of people because of what they look like or what their education might be or where they come from, and how those assumptions really lead to these like deeply rooted subconscious biases, and that often we are not considering the intersection of everyone's identity when they show up in the workplace, especially in leadership roles. You have expectations of what a manager should be or how a manager should act. And you really have to provide them the supports for them to be able to grow and have all of the pyramid: safety, psychological, empathy, and ability to support others in their growth. We do have one question. Don, I copied it, but Don had a question around what's your advice for helping Gen Z collaborate in like this new generation, and like how, as they come into the workplace, what are some of the structures to support them? And then she mentions diversity can be a real challenge on a team, especially if new grads have little to no experience working with others in a synergistic way. I'm curious what you think of that question.
I'm happy to take this one. I think we're seeing more and more generational shift with how we work, and the old ways just won't cut it anymore. Case in point, now I know the big debate is with the job, the great resignation, and now we're talking about hybrid work and remote work and what that will look like for the next generation. Gen Z, from what I've observed, are looking for more purposeful work. They're just not looking for work for the sake of it, or I just want to, get a paycheck. And so as managers and organizations, we need to show clearly what the purpose and the value is for the work that folks are doing, and be flexible to different ways of work. Like now, there's a lot of organizations who are just holding on to, you need to come into the space because we have a brick and mortar. And that's not going to fly a lot of times for the new generation, and not showing that purpose and passion as to why the work you're going to be doing actually helps ABC, helps their environment, helps the community, and helps like the future. If that alignment is not clear, we're going to be losing out on great talent who actually want to do work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the work goes both ways. I think new talent has to learn, and then we have to learn how to adapt to them too. Fahd?
100%.
Yeah, I'd love to actually share a slide here. I'm gonna jump in quick. Here are the changes we're seeing in regards to a shift in generation, and this comes from some of Gallup's research also. So I think Janey said it. We're no longer looking for paycheck. We're looking for purpose. We're no longer looking for just satisfied to the job. No, I need you to be actively engaged in my development. If you don't care about my growth, I don't care about you. Like, quite simple. I don't want you to be my boss. I want you to be my coach. What does that mean? My boss dictates, tells me what to do. My coach teaches me. My coach supports me and helps me grow. There's a lot of abundance. I can make money off selling, stuff online, or I can work for you. Why am I going to work for you? Because you're gonna coach me. You're gonna develop me. You're gonna help me. Otherwise, I'll go make the same amount of money trying to figure out an internet business. Right? My annual review, I don't want. We hate annual reviews. I don't know about you, but it always made me nervous. I'm always like, oh my God, someone's gonna tell me I'm doing bad, and you feel this shame. How about we just have ongoing conversations about what I could be doing better, constant feedback, and how about we focus on my strengths instead of my weaknesses? Strength-based approaches are the way to go for everyone, not just this generation. And it's no longer my job, it's my life. That's really the big shift, is that we no longer see a lot of this work-life balance. Yes, I agree with it. But it's like, if I'm going to work and spend so much time on this job, I need it to be aligned with my life goals.
That's right.
So it needs to be aligned with what I'm trying to get to. So that's a big, big piece of it. And that's really what wraps the rest. Because it's my life, I care it's a purpose. Because it's my life, I need to be developed. Because it's my life, I want conversations. Because it's my life, I want you to work with me on my strengths and not just focus on my weaknesses. And the last bit I'd like to throw out there, because I think this is what makes it nuance, the nuance so key. I'm working with a lot of companies right now, and some of the older managers are saying, Fahd, I'm really afraid of what I say around some of the younger folks, because I'm going to say something wrong and I'm going to be dragged through the mud. And I said, that's really interesting. That's really interesting, because, what we've done is we've raised a generation of young people, myself included, who can tweet at Justin Trudeau or tweet at our premier and say, you suck. We're used to calling out the man, calling out the system. We've created a generation of direct access to voice, to voice dissent. And then we come to these organizations, and organizations struggle with how we voice our dissent and how we should do appropriate systems to voicing dissent. What I encourage you to do is actually have the conversation with your young staff to say, listen, I'm going to make mistakes because I'm on a journey of learning more about race. I'm going to make mistakes. I'm on a journey of reconciliation and indigenous rights. I'm on a journey of learning more about how to be engaging. And I'm going to say things wrong. And I want you to let me know, but I want you to call me in, not call me out. Call me in to the conversation. Educate me about what I could do better. Don't call me out and dismiss me. Because I'm learning, and I'm a few years behind. And sorry that I am, but I need you here with me. And we're partners. We're not boss and employee, but we're partners in this conversation.
Yeah, amazing. I think that's a perfect segue into our keynote, which is starting in a minute. Avery Francis, is work working? A big thank you to Janey and Fahd. I encourage you to connect with them and email them, or even use the sessions that you could schedule a networking event with somebody. We hope you had a ton of learnings and takeaways from the session. And I'm just so grateful for both of your time and your energies and your honesty and your ability to show up in this space and share all of your thoughts and expertise with us. Thank you so much.